Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Codesplain. Today, I will be diving into the code behind the classic Snake game written completely in vanilla JavaScript. I'll walk you through the key concepts and the logic that makes this game work. So let's get started. We start by initializing the fewer game variables that this game requires. We start with the board element that is the main base for the setup of the game. We use the document.querySelector tag to declare the board variable. The document.querySelector requires a class name or a ID name that is in this game board. Next up, we initialize our snake body. The snake body is initialized using an array of objects. The objects carry x and y variables that are basically the positions within the board. In this case, we are initializing only one object at the beginning, that is to say that the first object is our snake head, which has x as 10 and the y as 14th variable. We use the same concept to declare the food element, that is x is 5th element and the y is 10th element inside the grid item, that is our board. The last time and speed variables are used by the main engine function for the request animation frame. The request animation frame keeps on calling upon the same function, which is our main engine, thereby creating a recursion that enhances our game loop frequency. There are some other variables declared here, such as the direction variable, which is x at 0 and y at 0. Let's understand the direction variable and how it works using the windows.add event listener. Here, inside the update function, we are looping up the windows.add event listener using a key down event that checks upon basically the 4 arrow keys, which are arrow up, down, arrow left and arrow right. If the arrow is up, then the direction variables x and y are declared as 0 and -1. Similarly, if the arrow key is down, then the direction variable x is 0 and direction y is 1. Similarly, the arrow left and arrow right changes the arrow direction dot x and direction dot y as -1 and 0, and the arrow right changes the direction x and direction y as 1 and 0. The windows.add event listener will keep on continuously checking the update function and continuously update the direction.x and direction.y variable. Within our main engine, we are calling upon the init function. The init function is declared as below, and the things that we are currently doing inside the init functions is the first thing is that we are clearing up the board as 0 0. That is, every time the init function loops around, the board will get cleared for once. Then the snake array, that is basically the snake body, we are looping it through using the for each function that creates the snake body every time an element is required. Then we check up the collide function. We will get onto the collide function later on. Below that is a getFood function. The getFood function is basically the same as the snake generation function. The food element here is created using a document.createElement technique that creates a div element and uses the grid row start and grid column start using the food x and food y that we earlier initialized. And this food element is then appended through inside our board base using the append child method. After the getFood function, which is called inside the init function, we then check if the snake head, which is the very first element inside the snake array, .x and the food.x are at the same position, and at the same time the snake head .y and the food.y are at the same position. Then, as the game suggests, then we are supposed to add a new element inside our snake body, that is to unshift a new element using x, which is now the new head position, using the direction.x and direction.y properties that is continuously being called and updated over the windows.add event listeners. At the same time, the food elements x and y are generated randomly again as the snake eats its food, then the food no longer needs to be there and needs to be generated again at another random position. The loop for loop be, the for loop behind the if condition basically checks that if the new food generated is already placed onto the body of snake body, then the food needs to be generated once again, and this function basically keeps on calling if that happens. The for loop below the for loop is one of the more important concepts and logics behind the snake init function. This loop is very important as it basically checks that if there are 9 elements inside our snake array, then all the elements keep on continuously updating towards the new position, that is that the ninth element should be after one frame at the eighth element, and the eighth should be at the seventh, and the seventh should be at sixth, and so on. And when it reaches to the first should be at the new position that we earlier declared here, that we earlier declared above if the snake eats the food head. If we notice here that then a spread operator is used here, because in the case of object referring we need to create new objects every time and not copy the same object values inside the new object. That is, the head is the new variable that keeps on updating after every spread operator takes place. In the end, we check that the snake array.x and snake array.y keep on adding the direction x and direction y values that runs upon the update function using the windows.add event list. Now let's understand the collide function. The collide function basically checks two things. If the snake body, that is the snake head, is out of bounds from the board position, that is there are 20 rows and 20 columns. So if the snake head goes out of the 20th row or the 20th column, or the snake body head goes below the 0th row or the 0th column, then we return true for the collide function. The next condition for the collide to be true is that if the body of the snake and the head of the snake collides into one another, then we also return the collide function to be true. Here we check in the init function that if the collide function is true, then we initialize the snake array to again one element, that is the first object of the snake head, that is x and y variables are 10th and 14th, which we earlier initialized at the start of the game. We are basically restarting the game here, so again the direction values will be initialized to the x and y to be 0. To wrap up, we have covered the main components of our snake game, that is to set up the game board, initialize the snake and food elements, handling the game loop, detecting collisions and updating the snake movement. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more coding videos. And as you can see, this is one of my very first videos that I have uploaded over here. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.